Hey guys, it's me, Hadassah Monique, and I just wanted to do a short video or whatever long video about spiritual maturity. Spiritual enlightenment, spiritual maturity kind of go hand in hand. One might wonder what it is to strive for in the quest for spiritual enlightenment, while spiritual maturity is at its core. But don't take my word for it. This is just my observation. Now, to gauge your own maturity, this sort of guide might be able to help you put you back on your path and figure out what areas you are weak in and need improvement. I like to think of myself as someone somewhat of a logical person. I am, after all, on the autism spectrum and I heavily latched onto the belief that if I don't see it in front of me, then it didn't exist or it wasn't real. So I used to be a skeptic and intuitive in denial. But long story short, you really can't run from what has been inherited or God-given, like a gift like mine. And as much as I tried, I was reminded pretty much almost every day, if not every other week, that I am intuitive and I do have intuitive gifts. And this happened often. That was kind of a sign of my own spiritual immaturity. I relied heavily on logic and not enough on what was going on here in my heart. I still have that issue where I think way too much, but when I balance logic and love together, I can make very good observations and connections, like while I'm solving my own spiritual mystery journey. So here is a list of traits of someone who is on the path to spiritual maturity. Now, please don't rely on this list heavily. Use your own judgment, as this is based solely on my own journey and experiences, what I've observed over the past 3 to 4 years of my spiritual journey. All right, so number one, you can balance logic and reason with love and light. It's not all about what you feel in your heart, but it needs to be met with your brain. So when you're feeling deep feelings, you can discern why, what, where, are, and how, or whatever these feelings are coming from. Are they mere coincidences? Well, coincidences don't necessarily negate the experiences that you have. There are such things as happy coincidences. So coincidences do not make you not intuitive. So, for example, it is a coincidence that I knew that someone was going to say something and they happened to say it. But it was just the thought process I had coincided with the thought process of somebody else. So we ended up being on the same wavelength. We had the same thought and we had the same, you were going to say the same thing, but all of that coincides with each other. Okay, so also the vision that I had coincided with the scene that I was going to see in the future. So none of this doesn't mean that I am not intuitive or that I don't have ESP. It just means that it's coincidental. Everything coincides. It's sort of like the same thing that people say is synchronicity is a form of coincidences, but that doesn't mean that synchronicity isn't a spiritual aspect or a spiritual experience. It's still a coincidence. Number two, you don't need a guru or a teacher. Following a teacher in the beginning of your journey is pretty good. I think that's a great way to start until you start to develop your own thoughts and feelings about your own personal spiritual journey. It's important to eventually come out of the fog of different ideas with your own and share that with others. But it's also important that you don't force your thoughts and feelings about your spiritual path onto other people as well, in an attempt to try to tell somebody how to live their spiritual life. You definitely want to find a teacher that makes you think for yourself so that you can grow, so that then you will be the same teacher that will provide information without forcing it down other people. And nobody likes to know it all anyway. So spirituality isn't proven or backed by science, and understand that we are dealing with a social construct of spirituality, or social constructs of spirituality. So it's impossible to be an expert in any kind of spiritual belief or practice. Knowing this is especially important. Finding a teacher that's going to back you up, and then becoming the same teacher that is going to be respectful of other people's journey without forcing your own personal beliefs and experiences onto other people. That is spiritual maturity. Number 3, you don't need anything. This one is especially hard to practice because of the kind of the world that we live in. Realizing you don't need a twin flame or soulmate, you don't need new devices, you don't need new clothes, you don't need new hairstyle. That's great, but in practice, it's very hard. But what most people want, I find that most people want, is love and acceptance. This is a very hard thing to curb. When you learn to love yourself and be happy with what you have versus acquiring objects and human flesh, then, well, you're on the road to becoming spiritually mature. Number 4, having an open mind. You may not agree with what you have learned, but you have a great consideration of whatever is presented. You should actually behave like the information is fact until proven unfactual, or vice versa. You have to give yourself room and time to be persuaded. Knowing you may be wrong is a big step. Being comfortable with being wrong and detaching yourself from the need of being right is a sign of spiritual maturity. Don't assume that they or the messenger is wrong. No. Look within. Could your feelings and thoughts be leading you to what you want to hear? Are you letting your stubbornness get in the way of enlightenment? Perhaps you were told something you didn't necessarily like and it struck a chord with you. Explore your feelings. Why does it bother you so much? So explore those feelings and return with a more mature outlook that you may learn something new and life-changing. And the last one, number 5, you respect the journeys of others. We all have different lives and journeys. No one has the right to approach a stranger's house and tell them how to shit in it. Actually, how would you feel if someone that didn't even know you tell you how to treat your body? It's kind of rude, isn't it? So, you need to approach others who are on their journey with respect and understand they know their journey well. You don't have to agree with them. After all, how would you feel if somebody were to tell you how to live your spiritual life? Spirituality is a social construct, again, not backed by science. So it's impossible to be an expert. To come off like you know more about another journey than the one that's living it is extremely intrusive and rude. Find someone who isn't going to judge you and instead will lift you up and encourage you and be the very same to others.